Welcome to the Father Alchemist. This is a show about karma, surrender, and transformation. It doesn't matter what you're struggling with. It could be motivation, money, vices of any kind, drugs, alcohol, porn, shopping, food, your health and fitness, family and kids, spirituality, your business, career, anything mind, body, spirit. The Father Alchemist is a show that will help you transmute and use all that pain to create the gold version of you, the best version of you. We're bringing in some of the top minds to give you a different perspective, to make you think, and most importantly, to help you change from the inside out and the outside in. The goal of the show is to give you support in your journey to becoming the best you in all areas of your life, so you can be proud of the individual you are and not held from being the greatest version of yourself. Please follow me at The Father Alchemist on Instagram and follow the show on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. If this show gives you value, a fresh perspective, if it makes you laugh or makes you think differently, please rate the show on your favorite podcast app, share it, like it, and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. Now let's make some magic happen.
A lot of people where I'm from don't make it out. I know that I'm blessed. It's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a check.
Dude, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for taking the time out.
Thanks
I know
for
you're a
having me.
busy guy, dude. I want you to be able to introduce yourself to the audience, but I also want to share a little bit about how I remember meeting you. But I'd love to hear your perspective first. I don't know if you remember that day. You know, like thinking back, I'm like, God, that guy must have thought I was just an asshole, or, you know, like I wonder what was going through your head in that moment.
Yeah.
You want to tell that story?
Yeah, so how me and Derek met, I was giving a nephew a ride in one of my cars. It was one of the McLarens. I can't remember if it was the blue one or the yellow one. Do you remember if it was yellow? Okay. And so we had just, I was trying to get to a road that was a little bit more open. And so I'd pulled over, like this little dry cleaning place, and was just turning around, and all out of nowhere, like Derek dives in. He's like, "Hey man, I've seen you driving around," or something like that. Which I thought it was kind of, you know, it does happen. People are like, "Hey, I love your car," or whatever, you know, as you're driving around. It just generally dudes. Sometimes people think, "Oh, cars attract girls." And I'm like, no, attracts dudes. Just like going to the gym. And so, I mean, I didn't think too much of it. You know, I enjoy meeting new people, so I didn't like perceive you as like a weirdo or anything like that.
I kind of perceived myself as a weirdo, like in the moment, because it's super unlike me. You know, the thought of doing it has always occurred to me. You know, I've always just sort of wondered, like, what does that guy do? Or, you know, what does she do? Anytime there's a nice car, you know, it's like you're not really seeing somebody in their amazing house, right? So oftentimes the way that you
Go
can
knock on their door. Hey, what do you do for
yeah,
me?
yeah, right. You know, that wouldn't be a bad show, actually.
Yeah.
But
I think there's a YouTuber that has done that.
as a guy that does it with cars, I know for sure.
I think there's a guy named Snooge.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
that's
yeah.
him. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Actually, I just saw an episode of him doing that with Wes Watson out
cool.
in Florida. Yeah. Good concept. But you know, to me, like success leaves clues, and so there's just something that day. I don't know what it was, man. I think it was just like there wasn't a lot of traffic. I you know, you pulled into that parking lot and stopped for a second. I think it was just that moment in my mind where I'm like, okay, like what do I have to lose? Like the worst case scenario is the guy blows me off and, you know, takes off and I've lost, you know, 2 minutes of my time. Right. But, I really was impressed, man, with how well you just like your energy and how well you handled that. And, just the grace and the approach, right? And we didn't talk for too long, but and guys, he kind of plays it down. I mean, this thing was sexy. I mean, this was what do you know what color yellow that is? Because it, you know, I say yellow and it's not a yellow, right? It's going to be some
McLaren yellows. I forgot the it might be volcano yellow or so. I forgot the actual name of it.
Well, so he's driving this we'll call it volcano yellow McLaren, and I just, you know,
from what I remember, I cut him off and stop and just like, dude, what do you do for work? And I felt kind of bad because you were sitting there with your nephew, and I didn't want to really interrupt, but also I was curious, and you were just really gracious and open about it. And you told me that you're a financial advisor, and that you also did some work with this exotic car company. And so, then we ended up going to breakfast, and I just remember, I think we've all heard that saying, like, you never remember what somebody says, but you always remember how they made you feel. And I remember leaving that breakfast just going, man, like, that's a dude to aspire to be. That's a guy that is honest and humble, has done something right to be able, and so I caught him driving a McLaren, and then he shows up to breakfast in a tailor-made Ferrari. And I think oftentimes people associate that level of success with sometimes a negative connotation, right? And I think my opinion is it's that their own limiting beliefs and misunderstanding of really who you have to become in order to achieve that level of success. And sure, there's going to be douchebags and assholes in every industry, driving every type of car. But my experience is the people I've met have been fantastic people that have really done something special with their life. And so I was just really impressed, man, after that breakfast. And I knew I wanted to have you on the show, but we weren't quite ready yet. And so, again, man, thank you for coming on. Tell the audience just kind of who Joe is, and what was life like growing up as a kid and with your parent. What was family life like? Did you grow up here? Was it out of state? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So born and raised here in Wheat Ridge, and the ancestry.com stuff that my mom's working on. I'm sixth generation in Colorado. Okay. So we had some ancestors that were here before Colorado was technically even a state. On my dad's side, my mom was born in Massachusetts. So people always ask or say, yeah, Colorado's a great place to live. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of partial to it.
Yeah.
Because I've lived here. My wife and I both live a mile from where we grew up. And so, it's funny. I feel like if we were to look at the world, just as a whole, I feel like if we're born in America, we're born on third base, right? We have kind of like this huge leg up, as a global perspective. If I were to narrow that down to kind of like just U.S. demographics, I would say I was born from a family standpoint, probably on like third base. I had a great family. I'll talk more about them. Financially, it was probably like on first base, or maybe like just getting ready to hit or something like that. Okay. So on my dad's side of the family, when my dad was born, he was born deaf. So without his hearing aids, he's about 85% deaf. He can't hear or make out any sounds if he doesn't have his hearing aids in. And they just grew up in real bad poverty. His mom left, or I'm sorry, his dad.
Was he born that way?
Yeah. He was born that way. He got stuck in the birth canal for too long, and something with pressure it damaged all his nerve endings, so he can't do like a cochlear implant or any of that stuff because it's nerve damage. So, so when he was 6 months old, his dad just peaced out and left. I don't think they knew that he was deaf at that point. Maybe they did. His dad was kind of like a free-spirited hippie. He's got kids all over the place. I've had people like email me on Ancestry say, hey, this guy's my biological father. I'm like, oh, yeah, wow, sweet.
This is your grandfather.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. Yeah. My dad ended up finding him later in life after my grandma passed away. But yeah, as my dad was growing up, and this was during the 60s, my dad was born in 58, right? When bullying, like people with bullying was getting beat. And so my dad would tell me stories. He'd be walking home and, he'd see this group of kids there and he'd be like, all right, looks like we're getting ready to go, is what he's thinking in his head. And he'd, do his best that he could do to fight. And he kept getting in trouble to fight. So my grandma actually took him downtown because she thought he was just fighting, maybe not necessarily being bullied. And so she took him downtown and had him fight gangsters, basically, like fist fights in the street.
What?
To try to beat the fight out of him.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That didn't work. He ended up getting into martial arts and wrestling and that kind of stuff. But, where he grew up and where the first house that we had was in Wheat Ridge. The actual address is 4905 Harlan Street. So if anyone wants to Google it, you can see that it's not an awesome house. So the house that my dad and grandma and her parents lived in was a 1-bedroom house. I don't know the exact square footage. It was 1 floor. On that floor, it was probably 600, 700, 800 square feet. There was a basement. It was just concrete, unfinished basement. Eventually, my dad, as he grew up, brought in a modular home and kind of attached it to it, made it like a duplex. But it was literally not just this past summer, the summer before, like a year and a half ago, it just like hit me. I was like, because I grew up going to that house, hanging out with my grandma. We were super close with my grandma. And it like just hit me. I was like, where did great grandma and grandpa sleep? He goes, in the bedroom. I said, where did Dodo sleep? Dodo's what we called my grandma. He goes, downstairs in the unfinished basement. I was like, where'd you sleep? He's like, usually on the floor, on the couch. Or if his grandpa, which was really the only father figure he had, was a bad alcoholic and he'd be beaten on his grandma and my grandma, like beat my grandma so bad, broke her ribs and stuff. Eventually he did get sober, and my dad said the last 7 years he was a great person the last 7 years. But yeah, it just like hit me though. I'm like, you didn't even have a fucking bed to sleep on. Like, you're born deaf, didn't have a bed to sleep on. And then, yeah, just somehow pulled himself out of it. So that's kind of the first, spot of inspiration that I have, is looking what he was able to do. Him and my mom met when they were really young. I have 2 siblings, an older sister and an older brother. And my mom had my sister when she was like 19 and 3 weeks old. So she had just turned 19 when she had my sister. And then had my brother a couple years later, and then me 5 years after that. So by the time I was in kindergarten, my dad had ended up getting a good job at the post office. He was a semi-truck driver, drove the 18-wheelers. He didn't do much over-the-road stuff. He would basically take the mail from the general facility and take it to all the other post offices around town. And he always worked nights. Kind of his typical schedule was he would, depending on seniority, that's how they would pick what shift you got. So, for the longest time, he was going in at 11, midnight, 1 in the morning. So like a typical day for him would be, wake up at 11, midnight, whenever it was, go to work. He always worked overtime whenever he could. So a typical work day was, usually 12 hours. So let's say he gets home at 11 or noon, the next morning, he'd eat some lunch, he'd go take a nap. I'd walk home from school, my brother, he's 5 years older. So when I was in elementary school, he's in middle school. We'd all just kind of converge at home. So it's kind of crazy having kids now. And when I was our 7-year-old's age, I was already walking to and from school by myself. And we live across the street from the school. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to let her walk to school by herself. And it's like 50 yards. So my dad would, take a nap from noon to usually about 3. One of us would have to go wake him up. And my mom was working as well. She had kind of the normal 9-to-5 job. So we'd wake him up at 3 o'clock. He'd take us to whatever sports we had, football, baseball, wrestling, whatever it was. My mom would get off work. She'd meet us at practice. That's one impactful memory, is every single one of us, my brother, sister, had someone at all of our sporting things, not just games, but every practice someone was there, whether it was my mom, dad, or grandma. My grandma became kind of like the team grandma, because she'd always be there with Gatorade or whatever. So even though my dad was, sleeping in 2, 3, 4-hour segments, he just found a way to make it to things. It would have been real easy for him to say, no, I'm going to bed at, noon. I'm going to wake up at 7 or 8 at night. And you guys just aren't going to do sports. Or if you do, you're going to ride with a friend, or you're going to have to walk to it, or whatever it was. But now they always made a point that they were at all of our stuff. So
what's your earliest memory?
probably around 4 or 5. I remember running around our house. I remember I had like developed this obstacle course around my grandma's house and our house that, like I said, my dad brought in this modular home that kind of attached to my grandma's home and became like a duplex thing. And I remember building this obstacle course where I'd like climb the fence, jump over, run through our front yard, crawl through the bushes, run around my grandma's house, jump over, run over some other stuff, and then jump over the fence again and just keep doing that. Like I remember doing that. And we moved when I was about 6. So it had to have been when I was 5, maybe 4 is kind of the earliest memory. I remember at that house, at bedtime, my mom would put me to bed, and I remember, she'd be up watching TV or something, and I would like try to sneak out, and I'd be like army crawling and trying to stay behind stuff, and of course she'd catch me every time. Now being a parent, I'm like, kids don't know how to sneak.
Was it impactful? Like you remember back to when you were 4 or 5 years old, but when do you think it became impactful for you in having that memory where you're like, God, he was there for everything. What an amazing thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, not till much later in life that I truly appreciated it. Like, I just thought it was normal. I just thought that's what parents did. And, with my wife, and she had great parents as well. Her parents are fantastic. Her dad has passed away, but, they weren't at all of her stuff. She's like, that's weird that they were at all your stuff. I'm like, well, that's just kind of how it was. But it wasn't until I was probably later 20s, and when we were starting to think about having a family and you're trying to process through that in your mind and what that means, that it really, you're like, holy shit, they did a lot. And they did a lot with a little.
I know for us, it's like we started to realize some of that stuff once we had kids. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if I'm being real honest, before I had kids, I mean, I'm still, selfish and self-centered, and I've got to work on that every single day. It's hard for me because I'm driven, and I have a big vision for the future. And I think sometimes that's difficult to balance, a family, and how do you prioritize that when also, like, for me, I don't feel like I'm anywhere close to making it, right? And I don't know that I ever will feel that way. I think that, my belief is you're either born with the hustle or you're not. And if you're born with it, it can be developed into something even greater. But when do you remember having, I don't know if it was an aha moment or if it was like incremental moments of like, I want to go down this path of, yes, your business is as a financial advisor, but really you and I know that you're an entrepreneur, right? You're just, maybe you make some money as a planner or as an advisor, but I think same with my industry, right? You're really running a business. You have to think and act like an entrepreneur and make high-level decisions sometimes. And when did that start to happen for you? And, what types of jobs did you have leading up to where you kind of like, started to really see income and net worth catapult?
Yesterday.
No. Yeah.
I always felt like I was very internally driven for something, like growing up and watching, movies like Bloodsport and Kickboxer with Van Damme.
I remember that.
Yeah, and just wanting to be like, physically hard. And I think there's a difference between being hard and looking good. And I would much rather err on just being hard. And then, another thing I think that helped, my brother and sister were 5 and 7 years older than me, and they're doing good now. But like high school, they didn't do a good job. They didn't get good grades. I remember, yelling and fighting with my parents, about ditching class and stuff. And I don't know if like I, was consciously thinking about it, like, oh, I want to get good grades and all that stuff. Maybe subconsciously that kind of led me to getting good grades. And then there was some sort of switch. I don't know. It was probably end of high school, beginning of college, where I was like, you know what, I just want to be successful. I don't want to stress and worry and about money. And I can be a selfish person too, and there's a lot of material things that I want to do and buy and all of that. But I think when it comes down to it, I feel like the motivator for money is it provides freedom and flexibility and really the ability to give back to things. I feel like we do donate a pretty good chunk of money. And, I have some big visions and things out there that's, I want to donate $1 million in 1 year. So, I think there's just there wasn't any big aha moment. It was just kind of
Is
a
that like
culmination.
a tithe thing, that $1 million in a year? So like to donate $1 million, that means
so
that you're at
tithing to
10.
church, to different, I'm part of a nonprofit that my niece had started. She passed away from cancer. So to other organizations, there are a lot of good organizations out there that do a lot to help a lot of people. And so, I just want to be able to give back. I don't have a problem with people making, billions of dollars. I don't think they should be obligated or forced to give money back, but I feel like ethically they should be given money back. That's just a belief that I have.
I think there's a lot of people out there that the mindset, and I know this because I'm one of them, or I was one of them, where it's like, okay, I understand the concept of giving back, but my original idea of giving back was, okay, if I have 10 $1 bills and I give somebody one of those 10 $1 bills, there's 9 left and I've got less money. And it wasn't until a friend said to me, think about those $1 bills as avocado seeds. Now, when you give them away and they get planted, imagine what can grow from those 10 avocado seeds. And it's the same way with money, and there's an energy to it, and you don't have to understand it, but it works. And, but this idea of like, once I make X, then I'll start to donate.
Doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if you make 50,000 a year, 500,000 a year, 5 million a year, if you're like, let me wait till I get to that next spot and then I'll start doing it, it's just not going to work, because what's going to happen is we're going to earn that much money and we're going to increase our lifestyle to that. Then we're going to earn more money, then we're going to increase our lifestyle. It's like a innate human instinct going back to caveman days where we always had to be hoarding stuff, right? We had to gather all the fruits and vegetables and meat that we could because winter was coming. We had to store stuff. And I think this is like a fundamental thing in humans, that we just have to hoard shit. That it doesn't matter if you have a 2-bedroom house or a 10-bedroom house, both houses are going to be filled with shit because we have this hoarding mentality. So with that, as you make more money, you're just going to find more stuff to hoard. The problem is we're not cavemen. We're not getting that winter. We don't have to stash our food. So we can afford to give some of that food to our neighbor or whatever. So the key thing is not waiting. It's like going to the gym. There's no perfect day to start going to the gym. You just got to go. Like waiting to give money is like getting in shape before you start going to the gym. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And then I think there's,
let me clarify. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a big amount. Donate $1.
Sure.
You see the Salvation Army dudes throw a quarter in there. Like, it doesn't have to be a huge chunk of money. It's more about developing the physical habit of doing it.
And the spirit of actually giving, right? I think for a long time I struggled with that too, man. Like, if I'm being real honest, it was just like, first the issue was, giving the money away, because then I thought I would have less. And, I've come to understand that that's a scarcity mentality, and I've shifted away from that. But, then you also have the idea that if you end up giving a bunch of money away, okay, I'm willing to do that, but now it's like I'm doing it because I've been told that maybe I'm going to get something in return. And then it becomes about the getting something in return, not just the spirit of doing it because you're genuinely helping somebody else without expecting anything in return. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think there's a specific correlation, or maybe there is a subconscious thing, because I'll tell you, for the last 10 years, we've progressively gave more money, and I've progressively made more money the following year. It's a really interesting phenomenon. I don't know if that's just because I'm becoming more mature in my career and, you know, I'm getting better at my job, or I don't know what it is.
I think there are too many, you know, coincidences of people that could say they've given money away and in some way their life has become better as a result, right? And I don't think it's always money, but I've certainly seen many examples of that being the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's times, and we talk about it too, that, you know, it's kind of the changes in life that have happened that, you know, I couldn't pay my bills. In 2012, I don't know exactly what my income was. I probably made actual income probably $35,000 or $40,000 in 2012. And I got an eviction notice for our house. I had a tow truck show up at my house to tow away my car. I didn't answer the door, so they didn't get the car. I eventually paid the car off. But yeah, just still finding a way to, and the crazy thing is, other than my wife, no one knew. Like, I just kept all that in. It was probably an ego thing, but it was also people aren't going to give a shit thing either. Like, if I'm telling people how shitty my circumstances are right now, what are they going to do? Give me money? And sure, they could, but I think internally I would have felt bad or guilty about that. In fact, one time, it was right at that time when just shit was hitting the fan, and my wife worked for her brother, and she was telling him a little bit about it, and he gave her like $2,000, and I was so mad that, one, that she was talking to him about it, and two, that, you know, he gave her this $2,000. Which, okay, well, we got this $2,000. I'm not happy about it, but let's use it. So I took that $2,000, and we had no money to go on this trip, and so we took that $2,000, paid off that $2,000 credit card, and then the fucking credit card company decreased our limit down to $500 because we had had it maxed out so long. Right. So now we're like, oh shit, how are we gonna do this week-long trip with $500? So anyway, we figured
Was that
it
before
out.
or after you got into planning?
After. So I've been doing it for like 4 years.
Okay.
At this point, which it's tough to give people financial advice when you're not doing good financially yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just something internally where, you know, and by the way, thanks for sharing that, man. Cause I've been there, you know, when I was living in California, this was before the market crashed in 2008. And, you know, I lived in a couple $1 million home in the hills, you know, right above, or right below Mulholland. Mulholland is, you know, sort of a main famous drive. They've made movies about it. So we lived on the Sherman Oaks side, just under Mulholland. Right on the other side was Holmby Hills, which is some of the most expensive real estate in the country. And, you know, and at the time I'm like, man, dude, I was in my 20s. I'm like, fuck, I'm doing great. And then lost everything, you know, like I remember the day I had, and it's ironic because my wife and I are looking at getting a new car, and we're looking at either the Escalade or the Denali or maybe a Tahoe. We need something bigger for the kids, right? And there's this subconscious part of me that's like, man, I don't know about the Escalade, even though that's probably, some would say, the nicer version of those three, because that's the car I had in 2008 that was repossessed, and I got to watch that be taken from me. I was living in this $2 million home. I didn't have transportation. I was married at the time. I had to walk everywhere. And that was, for me, going into one of the darkest times in my entire life. And you're right. I think when you're in a position financially where things aren't going well, you know, and I can't really say like it's different for women versus men, but what I can say as a man is that your mission, your vision, your purpose are critical. They're so important. And when a man loses his ability to make money, or doesn't have any, or credit cards are maxed out, at least for me, that took a huge toll, obviously financially, but mentally, physically, my health. I mean, it really, I wish I could say different, but it got the best of me, man. And I really deteriorated for a period of a couple of years while I tried to figure out what the fuck I was going to do and who I was. Tell us a little bit about just what you were thinking, if you can remember back to that time when you were like, shit, my credit cards are maxed out. I'm kind of bottling it all up. I'm not telling anybody about it. And I think you're probably spot on. It's an ego thing. It's a pride thing. And it's also, I know for me, it was like, I just feel like I never want to bother anybody. And you're right. Who's going to care anyway? But the other side to that is like, if all I'm doing is talking about my problem, I'm a big believer in manifestation, and what you think about, you bring about, and what you put out there. So, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Secret, but there's a guy in The Secret, Proctor, can't remember his full name right now. But anyway, he talks about, hey, whether you're in debt or out of debt, you're focused on debt, you're just going to get more of it. Focus on prosperity, set up an automatic repayment plan, let the debt take care of itself, and focus on prosperity. And I'm just wondering kind of what was going through your head during that time. And also, how did you dig yourself out of that emotionally, psychologically, physically? Were there any, would you share any of those ideas or tactics now looking back with the audience that, somebody listening to this might go, shit, that's me, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing to add on to what you said, as a man and as a husband or as a father, and again, going back to like caveman days, and this is just a belief of mine, not to get into all the gender craziness right now, but, I believe a fundamental job of a man is protection, right? Protection for their family. Cavemen, right? You got to fight off the saber-toothed tiger or whatever it was. A lot of safety or protection today is making sure we have a roof over our head, that we have food, that, your family feels like they're in a safe spot. So, yeah, I did take it really hard. I just felt like a failure. And 2012 was a really tough year, and it was the year that we got married. And one last story, and then I'll talk into kind of how I got out of it. We, my wife's brother bought our honeymoon for us to Dominican Republic, and like packing, like I had swim trunks and sandals and some t-shirts, like I packed really light. And we get there and they're like, well, for dinner, you have to wear pants. I'm like, fuck, I didn't bring my pants.
That would be me. That's funny.
So we go to the little shop there and there's these pants that they're actually kind of cool. They're these white, baggy, comfortable pants, but I think they're like $80 for this pair of pants. And I'm like, fuck, I don't know. Like if I have $80 to buy these pants, like right now. So put the pants on the counter, credit card worked, had pants for dinner. So, I mean, there was a lot of really hard, stressful times. And then coming into 2013, it was kind of a lot of the same. And then finally in 2013, and, I had been researching how to run a marathon, ironically, and I came across David Goggins. I know a lot of people know who he is. And fortunately for me, this is, before he really kind of blew up and got really, really popular. And so I found an old email address for him through like one of his old websites or something. And I sent him an email. I was like, hey man, I don't know if you work with anyone, but I'm looking for a life coach. Would you be open to working with me? He replies back, yeah, sounds good. And so we talked a little bit, came up with like a price, what I was going to pay him.
Was that the actual email, by the way? Just, yeah, sounds good. Do you remember?
No, the actual email was, I forgot how he started it, but he said, I'm getting ready to run a race. I'll get back to you on Sunday.
Okay.
The race that he was getting ready to run, I think it was his third or fourth time doing it, was the Badwater 135.
Okay.
If you haven't heard of it, it's a 135-mile race through Death Valley, which is the hottest place on Earth. In July, it's so hot on the concrete that they have to run on the lines or their shoes melt. It starts below sea level because Death Valley's below sea level, and I think it ends at like 9,000 feet. And I don't remember the exact schedule, but I feel like the race was, like a Thursday or Friday, and it's not like a couple-hour race. I think that you're a very good runner if you do it in 30 hours or something like that. And so, anyway, sure enough, finishes the race and emails me back on Sunday, says, "Yep, sounds good. Let's do it. Let's talk." So had a conversation with them. He's like, "Okay, I'll charge you this." I was like, "I can only pay this." And then we kind of met in the middle.
Huh. Where did you find him again?
I just found some random email online.
Oh.
How I came across him?
Yeah, how did you come across Goggins in the first place? Was it a video of some kind?
Yeah,
or?
it was like he had a couple YouTube videos out.
Okay,
This was,
okay.
Again, back in 2013.
Interesting.
Yeah, 2013 now.
Uh-huh.
So I would watch like his videos and, get motivated or whatever. And then after a while, I was like, man, I should like find a way to contact this guy. And so I just found some random ass email address and it worked and he got back to me. And so, keep in mind, this is in the time period that we still don't have any money, right? We can't pay our bills. And now all of a sudden I'm going to pay this dude to tell me how to work. And like,
Right. Yeah.
How am I going to talk to my wife and be like, okay, I got this other expense per month, even though we can't pay our bills.
At the time, so it sounds to me like you labeled him at the time as a life coach, but so there must have been something in that video where it resonated with you in a way where you're like, okay, I need to change in order for my outcome to be different. Like I don't have money, but rather than attacking business or the thing that's going to make me money, you somehow felt connected to the message of like, I have to get better and there's something within me that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, and I said life coach, but it was really a mental coach.
Mental coach.
Like he was
Got
coaching me everything brain-wise. And I think it resonated with me because it kind of took me back to those days watching Kickboxer and Rocky and all of those 80s and early 90s action stars. And he just kind of reminded me of that, like the Rocky that just keeps getting knocked down and keeps getting back up. And when he broke the world pull-up record, he had the song from Rocky playing on a loop for 24 hours. So he did pull-ups for, and just had the same, it's in round, whatever it is, 15, when Apollo keeps knocking Rocky down, but he keeps getting up. And like you can just see it in Apollo's face that Goggins is like, yep, Rocky took his soul. So anyway, it was like this mentality thing that I felt like I needed to shift. Like I knew what I needed to do, and I knew I had the ability to work hard. I just wasn't channeling it in the right way. So we came up with a game plan, and I just stuck to it. And so he coached with me for 4 years. I talked to him on the phone nearly every day for 4 years. Out of the 1,400 days and 4 years, there's probably 10 to 20 that we actually didn't have a verbal conversation.
That's amazing, dude.
That some of those conversations were quick, 45-minute check-in calls. Sometimes they were 45-second check-in calls. Sometimes they were 45 minutes to an hour conversation just about life.
Can you give us an example of like, that's a lot of phone conversations. But when I think about mental health, or not mental health, but mental toughness, right? Do you remember back to any one particular conversation where it was like a specific concern or issue or?
Yeah. Right. They say the comparison is the thief of joy. And even after I stopped working with David, I still struggled with this. I would still compare myself and what I was doing physically to what he was doing. I'm in a good spot. I've been in a good spot with it now for a long time, where I'm not comparing myself because we're all going different paths. And really one really specific conversation was, came out and stayed with us for about a week, and we're doing training and stuff, and we had this we were doing it was like 13 or 14 mile run or something like that. That from where I lived at the time to run up South Table Mountain right here, do 2 laps around and come back. It ended up, it was 13 miles because it was a half marathon. And so run up, I'm doing my 2 loops. I'm coming down off the mesa and he's coming back up. I'm like, what are you doing? Because I knew like how many miles he should be at. And he had like dropped me a long time ago because he's way faster than I am. So, but he's like, got to get my hills in. I don't have hills where I live because at the time he was living in Illinois. So as I'm coming down, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to push really hard and I'm not going to let him catch me. And so it was about 2.5 miles to get back to my house. So I'm pushing, pretty hard. Get back to my house. A couple minutes later, he comes up the driveway, and I was like excited. I'm like, bro, I was pushing so hard. I was like, man, you'd be proud of me. I really left it all out there. Yeah. And he's like, he just goes off. And his exact words were, motherfucker, you don't worry about what the fuck I'm doing. He's like, you run your own motherfucking race. And it just like hit me. It's like, it's so true. Like with everything in life, you just got to focus on your journey and your race, right? For let's use running, for example, right? If someone's just starting out running, you can't compare yourself to an ultra runner that does 100 or 200 mile runs. Yeah, I think you can draw on it for inspiration, but you can't make yourself feel bad if you're running a 5K and they're running 50K, right? You focus on what's your mission, what's your goal, right? And if it's fucking running 1 mile, that's awesome. Like just do whatever your race is. And so that was one of the biggest points that stuck out to me, was focus on your own journey. A lot of the other stuff was just, it was just like mental, everything he preaches, he does. And I've seen him do it. And him trying to kind of instill that mental toughness in you. And that's such a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a buzzword. Oh, you want to be mentally tough. Sure. But I love how he describes it, callous your mind. And I can't tell you how many instances now where I have calloused my mind that he describes it as, right now you're putting cookies in the cookie jar. And then when you're doing the next tough thing, you can go pull out a cookie and be like, hey, remember when I did this? So that was
reminders of things that you did so you can remind yourself who you are.
Yep. And the hard part is you have to keep doing those hard things because you forget how shitty it was. The human mind has a miraculous way of downplaying how shitty things can be, right? Think of childbirth, for example. There's only one reason why a woman has more than one fucking kid, because how shitty it was. It's because they forgot how shitty it was when they were in labor. Right. Your brain is like blocking out that pain.
Yeah, totally.
So you, in my mind, you gotta keep callousing your mind. You gotta keep reminding yourself that you're tougher than you think you are. That you can push harder than you think you are. Whether that's a physical thing or a work task, and you're just putting your mental energy into it.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, like with your business, was it a gradual sort of growth in terms of income and net worth, or was there an event where you put blood, sweat, and tears into it, you hired David Goggins, there was 4 years of working on yourself and your mind, and then something big happened, or was it little things that added up over the last, 10, 15 years?
I haven't heard anything I've said this whole time. So yeah, it was much more a gradual climb. I have this poster in my office where it's like 2 stick figures, and on the left is this ladder with really spaced out rungs, and then on the right is this ladder with really small rungs. And the dude sitting there with the spaced out rungs, right, is still stuck on the ground because he can't even reach that first rung. Versus the person on the right, is halfway up the ladder because they're just taking little steps. And so with my business, it's all about consistency. It's all about small wins, and eventually those small wins add up. And you know, you look in 5 years, you look back, and you're like, "Holy shit, I can't believe where I'm at now." And I want to preface it because I am in the financial industry, and in the financial industry, you know, especially in pop culture, gets a really bad rap, right? People think of The Wolf of Wall Street or the movie Wall Street, where it's just a bunch of crooks and stuff. That in any industry, there's a lot of bad eggs. You know, our industry is no different. But the vast majority of people in the financial industry were just normal people that are just trying to make a living. And we genuinely care about our clients, and we genuinely want to help them out. I've cried with clients in meetings. You know, I've helped clients retire. I've helped clients put their kids through college. I've paid out life insurance claims, you know, when people are reeling, you know, just not having to worry about the financial side of things during those traumatic moments. You know, it can be, you know, a small shining light in those dark times. So, you know, as I'm going through some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, there was always the intention that as I'm helping me, I'm helping these people out way more than they're helping me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so a big thing with our business is you have to build your own book of business from ground zero, right? You start with 0 clients and you got to build that up. Which with that, there's kind of only 3 ways to build clients in our business. The first is cold calling, like just straight getting the phone book out, call the A's today, call the B's tomorrow. That's not fun. You don't want to do it. The people you're calling don't want you to do it. So the next is advertising, right? You have, I mean, this was before Instagram and all that stuff, but you have like a TV ad or a billboard or whatever. I definitely think there is a place for social media in advertising nowadays. I don't do it, but I think we're kind of shifting in that direction. Advertisements and billboards typically don't work. People that are busy and doing well typically aren't going to pick up the phone and call after they see a TV commercial. Sure. And so the third way is just through networking and word of mouth. You know, I work with you, you're happy with me, you enjoy the work that I've done for you and your family, so you refer me on to Bob, who you work with. He's happy, he refers me on to Susie, right? And so in order to do that, we got to get out, hustle, get a number of referrals, and then we got to make a lot of phone calls to set those meetings. And so in our industry, or at least at my company, and keep in mind, I don't even want to say the company that I work for, because this isn't about me. I hope whoever's listening to this is getting some value out of this. That for my company, a good day is making 40 phone calls in a day. Sounds like a lot. It's about an hour and a half of phoning. That, you know, if you phone for an hour and a half, you keep 3 client meetings, you know, those can be an hour and a half each. So, you know, between an hour and a half of phoning and those 4 or the 3 or 4 client meetings, you know, you're at 6 hours of kind of work, but then you have all the other admin stuff that you got to do. So you get to the 8, 10, 12-hour days. So the first week I'm working with Goggins, he's like, all right, well, what's something big that, you know, would be something that you know, haven't done before, you know, be a big challenge, basically. I don't remember the exact words with this. And
like with the business?
Yeah.
Or like a sale?
Yeah, with my business.
Okay, got it.
And I say, okay, I know 40 dials in a day is really good and really hard to do consistently. I've done 100 a day a couple times. So
do you use a dialer?
No. I mean, we were pushing buttons and shit. This was 2013.
Okay.
We didn't.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if I think I probably had an iPhone at that point.
BlackBerry.
I did have a BlackBerry when I first started.
And a pager.
And a Palm Pilot.
A Palm Pilot.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude. I remember those.
I'm 90% sure I had an iPhone. But yeah, we weren't doing any automatic calling or anything. It was, you call someone, you hang up, you call the next person.
Okay.
So this isn't hey, I used to have to fucking walk to work 3 miles uphill with snow with no shoes every day. Like the job was relatively simple to do. It's just you had to do it.
Yeah.
So I go, okay, I'm thinking this. Okay, I've made 100 dials in a day. So I go, well, if I do 500 dials for this week, that would be huge. I've never, I don't know anyone in my local office that's ever done that. He goes, sounds good. We'll do 600. So I'm like, fuck, game on, I guess.
600 per week.
Yeah, that first week.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that was the goal that we
Okay.
broke up for that first week.
Uh-huh.
So immediately I'm like, fuck, man, I thought 500 was going to be a lot. Now I got to do 600.
Uh-huh. So you got 125 calls a day.
Yeah. So I still remember it. The first day I did 220.
120. Yeah.
I did 220 the first day. Second day I did 250. Third day I did 270. So I'm already over the 600 by that Wednesday. Like I was really amped up.
This
I'm
is
like,
without a dialer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I got it down to where, and I didn't leave voicemail, so it cut the time down. And at that point, for me to dial the phone, for it to ring, for it to hit a voicemail, it would take 48 seconds. So it would take me on average about a minute per dial.
Okay.
Right. To hang up, find the next person,
Okay.
call them. So yeah, 60 dials take me about an hour, 200 or 120 take me 2 hours. So, 250 is 4 hours of just dialing.
How many of
that
those
day.
people on average are picking up?
With those that I was doing kind of like a hybrid thing between cold calling and referrals where there was some like warm connections
Okay.
type stuff. I was calling a lot of office numbers, which that was fun. Always trying to get through the gatekeepers and stuff. I have a lot of tricks for that. I would say, and I have it all tracked in my notebooks and stuff. Actual answers was probably 50%.
So you were calling on companies or individuals?
I was calling individuals.
Okay.
But no one had
Like a C-level type of individual or?
At this point I was still in my 20s, so I was calling like managers.
Okay, got it.
I was still too scared to call this.
But there's still a gatekeeper.
Yeah, for a lot of like some companies they'd have the dial by name directory, so you don't have to talk to someone. Some gatekeepers you'd call and say, "Hey, can I talk to John Smith?" And they'd just transfer you.
Sure.
Some of the gatekeepers were like really good, and they'd hammer you away. Why do you want to talk to John? Can I tell him what it's about?
Yeah, right. A particular industry you were calling on?
No, I was calling everyone.
Just whoever. Yeah.
Everyone.
Phone book? Like for the cold stuff?
No, so that's why I was calling link. I was utilizing LinkedIn, but I was calling office numbers because no one has their cell phone number on LinkedIn. So I'd find a person that I felt like I'd want to talk with, and then I'd find out where they worked, and then I'd just call the office number.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Give us like one trick that you would use to get past the gatekeeper.
So if a gatekeeper picks up and they're like, who do you want to talk to or whatever they say, I'd say, John Smith. Just keep it real simple. Like, I don't say, hey, this is Joe Morin with XYZ, is John Smith available? I just say, John Smith. Then, 50% of the time they just transfer you at that. And the other 50% of the time, then they'd ask a follow-up question. What can I tell them what it's regarding? Oh, I have a mutual friend in so-and-so.
Got it.
That's it.
Got it.
I keep it real.
Because they're from LinkedIn, and so you knew who the connection was.
Yep.
So you'd use that connection to kind of leverage name drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yep. Which all those connections the connections that I were using to call, I had asked that person, hey, do you mind if I reach out to your connection? So they were they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
By the way, guys, I just want to say, Joe started by talking about 40 phone calls in a day up to 250, 280 in a day. Like doing 40 phone calls a day consistently, it ain't easy. Like, I mean, listen, anybody could get super excited and make 40 phone calls in a day, but guaranteed most people are going to not make those 40 phone calls the next day, or maybe they power through for a week and then that's it.
No.
Talk a little bit about the consistency that you developed with that approach, even though it sounds like Goggins had you go like super hard at it for a while.
Yeah. So that week we set the goal at 600 on Friday. Or I did 220, 250, 270, and I think it was 200. I have it all written down. I don't know what that math is in my head. So anyway, on whatever that Thursday number was, I only had to do 50 on Friday to then hit 1,000.
Okay.
And so I ended up doing 51. So I got to 1,001 for that first week.
It's awesome.
And then from there, man, I was just running. I didn't do 1,000 every week then moving forward. I just didn't have the time for that because I was now scheduling so many meetings.
Sure.
But for months and even, years, I was running it doing anywhere from 60 to 120 dials a day keeping 4 to 5 client meetings a day, which,
were you married at the time?
I was married, but no kids. So I had a lot of time, but even in my mind, I still broke it up to say, okay, well, if I do 60 in a day, that's an hour of hard work. And that's really the only, in my mind, like the shitty part of our job.
Sure.
Like client meetings are awesome. I love talking to people. I love getting to know them. I love helping them out. But the dials suck. So I broke it up. I'm like, okay, I can work and do shitty work for an hour. And then with the amount of dials I was making, I was keeping 4, 5, 6 meetings a day. So now that's like 8 hours worth of meetings. Okay, so I'd phone for a day, have 8 hours of meetings. That's 9 hours of work.
Okay.
I just got in the habit of getting to the office at like 6 or so.
Okay.
5:36, I'd be getting to the office.
Okay. When would you start the calls?
9, depending on time zone.
Okay.
Yeah.
When would you leave the office?
Usually about 5 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I got in at 6
to 5. Yeah.
Yeah. If I got in at 6, I'd get a lot of my like office stuff done.
Sure.
Before start phoning client meetings. I have a number of clients in the construction industry that they're early birds, so I'd have meetings at 6 in the morning sometimes with clients. So yeah, I just broke it down and quantified it in my head where okay, I can do a shitty hour of work meeting with these people, and I got 6, 7, 8 hours of client meetings, which isn't necessarily physically hard, but it definitely is a little mentally hard. Staying on it and conversing with and having a very good engaged conversation, for an hour, hour and a half can definitely be challenging. But even if it was 8 hours, that's 9 hours. So 6, 9 hours, that takes us to what, 3 o'clock? No, 4. Yeah, 3 o'clock p.m., right? 12. Yeah, 3 o'clock p.m. I still had like 2 hours of free time is kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah.
So,
was it like, hey, if I can get this crappy part of my day done, I can kind of chill? Was that the motivation? The drive a little bit?
That was what I quantified in my head. It didn't always work out like that.
Yeah. We all know you didn't chill after that, but like.
Yeah. In client meetings, sometimes I'd have a client meeting at 9 when typically I'd phone, or I'd have a client meeting at 5 p.m. So I may have like a 2 or 3 hour window between, 3 and 5.
So did you ever have like we call it a go-to conversation, right? It's something that my team and I are talking about on a weekly basis. We try to keep our message consistent. That way, if somebody calls back and they get somebody on the team, hey, Derek was reaching out to you. I'm sure he wanted to tell you about the workshop that we're doing next month, but we always, like, the team's always on board with what the message is that particular week. I'm wondering if you had something that you had not scripted, but like thought about in advance of those phone calls that you could lead with.
Like how to connect with that person?
Sure. Yeah. How to connect. Cause you're trying to get the meeting, right? Like that's the idea of the phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're trying to get the meeting. Some of these people are warm, some aren't, but talk to us about how you got the meeting.
Just having a great phone voice, I guess.
Okay. Just using whatever you could.
Experience. I did phone sex at night, for extra money.
You're still doing that.
It just came from repetition, man. It was just all, oh, I said this thing to this person, this worked or this didn't work. So it was constantly just critiquing what I was saying. So yeah, there's not really a magic thing to that other than, it's kind of like what you eat for a diet. Like you figure out what's good for you, what's good for your body. It may not work for you and your personality, right? What I say on the phone, it may be different from what you say on the phone.
Yeah.
Our the person that runs all of Colorado for us, he's a very emotional person. So he can say stuff and connect with people on this emotional level. I've seen him cry in our study group meetings. Like he cares so much about people that you want to think of this from, this running this huge organization that,
Passion sells, man.
Yeah, but like he like feels it, like he means it. That wouldn't work for me. I'm not an emotional person. I'm a very quantifiable, let's get down to the numbers type of person.
Okay.
So yeah, it was just about figuring it out, who I jived well with from a client perspective. There are certain clients in certain industries that I don't want to work with, not because they're bad people. I just don't jive well with them from a personality standpoint.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's always been hard for me, because I think the whole thing's kind of coming full circle, right? With scarcity versus abundant mentality. And I think, to me, it's been tough because it's like there might be an agent or, a client that I want to work with. And I know that they do a lot of production and it could be a big deal for my family and I.
Turkish cheese.
Yeah. I know. I need some more, man.
Sorry,
I down that stuff. But, I just think that, where was I going with that?
Scarcity mindset.
Scarcity mindset. We were talking, just working with particular clients and how sometimes it's tough, man, for me to like cut off the relationship, because I'm thinking that this is somebody that, they're going to give me business and I'm going to make money as a result. But what I've learned is it's just not worth it. Did you always have that approach? Like, I'm just going to work with the people that I actually connect with? Or was there ever a time where you're like, credit cards maxed out, I'm going to work with anybody?
Yeah, there was a lot of points where I'm like, dude, if you can fog a mirror, like if you're breathing, I'll work with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that has come with a lot of hard work where I can be a little bit more intentional and choosy with who I work with. With that said, I'll never tell someone no. So a lot of people in the financial industry got to say, you got to have X amount invested in order to work with us.
Sure.
While I may not work with that person directly, if I have someone that reaches out to me and they want help, I'm going to connect them with another person in my office that I know is going to take care of them and do a good job for them. So
that's awesome.
But in order to be able to do that, it took a lot of hard work to be where I can be a bit more choosy. I have really two criteria for people I work with. You got to be financially responsible. As much as I want to help people, if you're not willing to put in the work, I can't do it for you.
Sure.
And you just have to be nice. Those are my two criteria. You have to be someone that I want to hang out with, have a conversation with. Like I said, we care about our clients. We want to. We're potentially going to, I have clients that have been clients for, 10, 12. I've been doing this 16 years. So I have some clients that are been around for 16 years. It's got to be someone that I enjoy chatting with.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, it all came down to, making a couple hundred phone calls a day to get
Do you
to
still
that
make phone calls today like that? No, now it's just managing the portfolio.
Which at that point I didn't have any employees. I had kind of like a shared staff model.
Okay.
Now I have my own team, so I don't make. Every now and then I'll make some random calls, but now it's my team is doing that.
So if you had to pick like an average number of calls you made and for how long, what would that be?
Average, I would say 80.
Okay.
Probably did 80 for 2 years.
Okay.
Probably went down to 40 to 60, so call it 50 for probably another 2 years. There would be, and that wasn't every single day, right? That's just the average.
Sure.
I would still bang out those 100, 200, 300 dial days. My record is 401 in one day.
Jeez.
It took about, I think it was 9 hours. I actually logged it where it was like from 9 to 9:30, I got to 35, and then 9:30 to 10, I got to whatever 50. Like I actually have it written down. I have. If you don't do it, keep journals and stuff of the work that you do. Every now and then, I'll go back and look at some of it and look at July of 2014. Here's the work that I did that day, and like sometimes it'll bring tears to my eyes where I'm like, holy shit, like. Again, not only what it's done for me, but the impact that I've had for clients and helping them out.
Not only the impact on your clients, but as you're growing a business and running a team, it now gives you the ability to say, I did this. I know what it takes to build a successful business, and you can lead by example. And dude, I'm so glad you shared that because, you know, I think in sales, it's really easy to get distracted by the water cooler, you know, the metaphorical water cooler where you kind of just start finding yourself doing shit that isn't moving the needle, right? Like you're not making money with it. And so to hear that you were making an average of 80 calls for 2 years, dude, that's fucking impressive, bro. It really is.
And you got to write it down because, again, I don't remember what that felt like.
You're talking about writing down the experience of like,
you got to make
400 calls. This is what I felt like.
Kind of what I was talking about earlier is you got to keep doing hard stuff because we forget what it's like. Mm-hmm. So I was like, so when I go back and I try to put myself in that position again, is reminding myself that I can do hard things if I need to.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. Yeah. That's awesome.
And keep in mind during this time period, like with working with Goggins, it wasn't just the work we were focusing on. Mm-hmm. He'd be asking me things like, hey, did you get your wife flowers? What have you done for her lately? You know, how are you making sure, you know, eventually I had a kid come into the picture. How am I making sure I'm doing that? And then obviously all the fitness stuff that comes with working with Goggins.
Sure.
Yeah. You know, hammering out a few marathons. And, you know, the first time I ran, it was a 2.5 mile run. And I'm sorry, it wasn't the first time I ran. It was the first time like I ran with a purpose to track.
Sure.
Okay. It was like go out, run 2.5 miles. Okay. I'm like, holy fuck, how can anyone do this? Like, how can you run 10 miles? Like, that seems impossible. Dude, my lungs were burning, my legs were shaking. Yeah. And now, like, all my training right now, I use the stair machine. I have fractures.
Great machine.
I have fractures in my T12 vertebrae.
Do you blame Goggins for that?
No, I have scoliosis and kyphosis, so my spine curves forward, almost like kind of like a hunchback thing. So where it's like pinching down, it's stress fractures basically. So I try to limit the impact that I do. I'll still do runs like I did a 50K last June for charity. I'm going to do it again this June for charity, but all my training is on stairs. But I know if I could go out right now and run 20 miles if I needed to. I may not like be in the same running shape. My cardio shape right now is ridiculous. But when you're running, you're using different muscles, different state, you know, the tendons and everything get stressed a little bit differently. So, right, I would be really sore running 20 miles, but I know I could go do it from a mental standpoint.
From a mental standpoint, right? Because
you've done it before. And I still have the cardio. So my cardio, like I use the stair machine at the gym that I go to. I forgot the name of the actual stair machine. I got it saved here because it's a pretty popular one. So I started off, and I would be at like level 6, 7, 8 when I would be starting. When I started really focusing on doing the stairs, it's oh shit, it doesn't have the brand name on it. I don't know if the camera can see it, but it looks like this.
we can put it up on the show once we edit it. But
and so I was at like level 6, 7, 8. Now I can do level 16 for an hour straight.
Jesus. 16.
Which that puts me at 5,000 feet of elevation gain or 500 floors in an hour.
That is fast.
Yeah, I'm pretty.
That's like you're running up the fucking stairs.
I feel kind of guilty because the machine's just soaked with sweat after.
Dude,
yeah,
that's
there's
hilarious.
Been sometimes, you know, every now and then I got to give myself some grace. It's something that I work with my therapist on is knowing when to say enough is enough. Because I can't tell you how many times where like I'll feel all right I feel like absolute shit, like I'm gonna die during the workout, and then like 5-10 minutes later after the workout, I'm like, oh fuck, I might actually die. Like I maybe pushed it too hard this time,
dude. I feel like we could sit here and talk forever, man. Like I wanna dive into that sort of attribute that a lot of successful people have of obsession and compulsion, and you know, it sounds like you've had some of that with all the calls you made and just your workouts. And what would you say, just to wrap up, what would you say to somebody that's listening that is just, they're they're not in a good place. Maybe they're that guy that's maxed out their credit cards. They're broke. They're scared. They're hiding it. They're not talking about it to their spouse, or maybe they don't have anybody to share it with, and so they're depressed on top of it all. They're anxious, but they know that there's something burning inside of them to do something great. What would you say to that person to get out of that?
Yeah.
And to start making those changes?
Small wins. Just small incremental wins. And fitness first. I believe physical fitness is one of the most important things in life. That my core values are faith, family, fitness, and finances, which finance is kind of like my work stuff. So I have, in order of importance is faith, making sure family's taken care of. Then I got to put my fitness ahead of or above what I'm doing work-wise. Because a physically fit means different things to different people. Like, I don't have a six-pack. You can kind of see some abs, but I'm in very good shape.
The first thing I noticed when I met you for breakfast was like, this guy's in good shape, and I think it's an attribute that a lot of successful people have.
But yeah, get your physical fitness on point, because you're tying one arm behind your back if you're trying to do the career part and you're not physically fit. And the wins that you get from being physically fit translate into your career. When you can do hard things physically, when you think of work, for the most part, work is hard mentally. Physical stuff is hard physically, and even more so mentally. So again, the Goggins, callousing your mind, is huge. And being physically fit is one of the very, 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 very few things that you can't buy. You can go to a doctor, you can get liposuction or whatever. You can get a Brazilian butt lift, right? If you were telling me you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I researched it for a while.
But to have that actual core physical fitness, you can't buy it. No matter, you could be a billionaire. It doesn't matter. That's only something you can develop after hours and hours and hours of beating on yourself. So developing that first, then figure out career-wise what direction you want to go. And don't measure your success on other people. It doesn't matter what I've done. I was just in an event where I was like the poor broke dude there. Like there were people. Amazing. Yeah, there were people that had 24 cars, and not like 24 $50,000 cars. Some of these cars were $2-3 million cars. Right. But it was so awesome that I didn't compare myself to that. I don't know what their backstory is. I don't know what base they started on in life. I don't know if they're self-made, if they're gifted. I didn't care. I'm just happy with what I'm doing right now. I'm proud of myself for the work that I'm doing. I'm not done. You can still want more and be happy, give yourself grace, be proud of yourself at the same time.
Dude, so that's what's up, man. Hey, seriously, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Man. This was a lot of fun. We got to do it again, seriously, because I think we could sit here and talk for hours, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you.
I can get into some of the more.
Hey, where can people, really quick, where can people find you? I know you don't have a big social right now, but where can people find you? And also,
I'm a huge influencer. I got like over 1,000 Instagram followers, bro.
Where can people find out about the charity that you run?
So our charity is called Project Soulflower. We had a niece when she was 17. She was diagnosed with a very rare bone cancer called Ewing's sarcoma. She fought it for 4 years. She ended up passing away in 2021. And when she was diagnosed, she was 17, so she got to do Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish is a awesome, amazing, fantastic organization, but they stop with their wishes at 18, going into 19.
Okay.
And when Katie, our niece, was in treatment, she made really good friends with a girl. She was, I think, 19 or 20 when she was diagnosed. And so she didn't get to do a Make-A-Wish. And Katie was like, man, it would be really cool if we could do something, you know, for people my age, you know, that are still kids, right? When we're 18, 19, 20, 24 even, we think we're really old and mature, but I mean, we're really just kids. We're really still figuring it out.
For sure.
And while it's awesome, and again, Make-A-Wish is so amazing, you know, a 10-year-old that's struggling to do a wish, there's a lot of things that someone that's 18 to 26, as far as life, you know, they're just trying to get their life going. That they're dealing with stuff, and there's a lot of things that they want to do. So Katie started Project Soulflower. When she passed away, we really started putting a lot of energy into it. So we we call them bucket list dreams to 18 to 26-year-olds that are, it's not necessarily cancer. It can be any life-limiting illness, where we'll do things like, you know, a 20-year-old that never went to Disneyland when she was a kid, we sent her to Disneyland. A huge car fan, we sent him to the Austin Grand Prix for Formula One last year. We've done skydiving and VRBOs to different locations. So there's a lot of neat things that we do. We're still small. And so right now our bylaws are just for Colorado. Okay. Obviously we're hoping to grow and change that. But it's been a really, I've been involved in some nonprofits. This is the first one that I've been really involved with though. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, bro. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. Thanks for coming on. Great to see you, dude.
Yeah, you too.
I love your stories. We didn't even get into the whole story about you going to Florida.
Yeah, we can do that another time.
So maybe next time.
Turn that loss to a check. Every time that I see a limit, I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck, nah.